my glasses are fogging up. Welcome to Marty's Garden, my friends. Woo!
Sun is warm, there's a gentle breeze. All the birds are making homes inside the evergreens. The air is clear with our loved ones.
All right, love that theme song to get the day started. The live show. Oh, I better get my thing here. Worm farming, my top 10 tips. Live here, right on the channel. Hey, welcome. Thanks heaps for coming. Appreciate it when it all turn up here. And Saturday morning, raining here again on site where I am. So, well, not down on site where I sell the compost. So we're home today. As promised from yesterday's live show, I said I'd bring out a live show with my top 10 worm farming tips, guys. And look, more towards the end of the show, we'll have a discussion about these tips. And also we'll get like a Q&A in there. And we'll even get some tips from you guys, the audience, because we often get quite a lot of educated worm farmers in here as well. So yeah, welcome to the show. What I'm going to do is I'm going to roll out the first tip. Then we're going to bring in some of the people here that have attended the live and start making it really interactive. I love it when we do this. All right, the tip number one, starting with worms. How many worms do we start? Now, the bare minimum would be 500, but I recommend 1,000 worms. Now, the worms that you need to get, that's totally up to you. Like if you can only get one species, I go with a tiger. Acina fetida is the species. But if you get a mixed species and put them all together and see what works for you, and don't worry about it too much, you know, when you first get started about all that stuff. But 1,000 worms will populate your farm quite quickly, and they'll go through your veggie scraps and things that you want to recycle much faster. So, yep, I highly recommend we start off with 1,000 worms. That's tip number one. Now, as we move right through to the top 10 tips, right near the end, we've got the super tips. So stay tuned for those, guys. Super tips are really cool. All right, let's roll on. Hey, Marty, love your theme song. Me too. That's one of my favourite songs of all time. And I don't use it in every video, but I like to use it on the live shows. The beginning and the end, slowly getting used to sliding the sound in and out, and yeah, it's just been really cool. And g'day LP, he's turned up for another live show yet again. Welcome, matey. LP, you're hardcore these days, mate. You're here all the time. Thanks for the support, I really appreciate it. Let's move into tip number 2. Straight off the rack is feeding. Now, when we're feeding our worms, just before we're feeding them, we've started up and we put the bedding in. We need to let the worms settle in a bit, right? You can actually like maybe just throw in a couple little banana skins or something like that just to sort of kick things off. But you want to wait usually a day or two for them to sort of settle in and they start getting under the blanket and moving around. They'll eat some of the bedding and things and then they'll start feeding. So tip number 2, this is really important. It's probably the most important tip out of all the tips that I'm going to provide today is don't overfeed your worm farms. Wait until the food is nearly finished and then feed again. And over time you'll see as the population of the worms are going, getting used to how much they're eating and how often, you can probably expand out a little bit and then just expand out slowly. If you overfeed and you have problems, take some of that extra food out and allow them to eat that food again and then start over again. So don't panic about that if you do overfeed, but good idea to avoid overfeeding because that's what creates all the problems with extra pests arriving and funky smells and things going a bit sour and that, right? So that's probably the most important tip of the day, I would say. Don't overfeed. All right, number 3, use a quality bedding. So when I'm talking about a bedding, it's a worm farm bedding, goes into your worm farm, right? So whether it be a DIY farm, it'd be an underground farm, it'd be a tiered system, a flow-through system, use a quality bedding. Now, some people only have access to certain types of materials, so use whatever you can, anything that's organic, if you know you only have access to that, or money might be a bit tight as well. A lot of people just use shredded paper and things like that. Now, and cardboard. Now that's okay, but it just takes a lot longer time for the bacteria to form around it. The worms are going to be hunting for food. The farm's still really setting itself up. It takes a lot longer. Once you've got farms that are going, you can repeat over and over. It's okay, but at the beginning stages, it is much harder to get going. Cocoa peat is the recommended bedding for all the people that are selling worm farms. They put a block in there. That's okay. It's actually a fairly good quality cocoa peat. Avoid the cheap, nasty stuff. It's full of salts. I've got a video on that on my channel about that type of fibre and where it comes from. And it's not real good. You want to buy the one that's designed specifically for worm farming and has the less salts in it. Okay, so the bedding that I recommend and is most common would be mushroom compost. Now, why would I recommend mushroom compost? Well, it holds a lot of moisture, so it keeps the worms really happy like that. It has a little bit of food in there, usually has a bit of sort of extra nitrogen put in from the process of it being cut down, such as aged chicken manure, things like that. Has some surface area with some bacteria on it already, and maybe a bit of mycorrhizae or fungi sort of stuff growing in there, and they'll eat that and skim off the sides and start producing a really good compost as well. And that way they'll just start getting healthy and getting ready to reproduce much faster. So I highly recommend that one. If you've got your own compost and you're composting at home, or you've got access to some compost, maybe someone like myself that sells it, you can then access some of that and you'll have a higher quality bedding again, because you've just got a wider variety of bacteria in there to set up the farm so they just feel healthy and get started. So there's our top 3 tips so far. Remember, we've got the super tips coming more towards the end, so stay tuned for those. And if you've tuned into the show, make sure you say g'day in the chat box. Say hello there. We've also got the link above in the chat box where you can become a worm wrangler, support this channel, and get access to the 2 courses, starting a worm farmer beginner's guide and starting organic seedlings a beginner's guide, and a whole lot of intermediate videos as well. So some top stuff going on in there, and it helps this channel keep on rolling along. All right, guys, we have tip number 4. Avoid these foods: citrus, dairy, meats, onion. Yep, avoid those foods. The reason being, the onion family, it just takes a bit longer to break down. If you've got a big, massive pile of compost somewhere outside, that might be okay, but in little worm farms, not such a good idea. They just go to that last, and then you always end up having to pull it out and things like that. They just don't prefer it. I think the bacteria doesn't get on it as early as, say, some other types of food. So anything that's really organic, they love that, but they just want to avoid dairy and meats. Brings in nasty flies and things. You've got to be like a master gardener to know how to really sort of process that stuff in a composting system. So here we've got some happy compost worms. Now, if you've been following some of the videos, you might recognize this photo of some compost worms in the top. Pull the blanket back, and that's what you'll see. Something like that. And they're just feeding on the top, and they're wrapping around each other. And where the lump is, where they're called the clitellum, that touches each other, it fertilizes their hermaphrodite, and then they'll produce cocoons. And they could produce 3 cocoons a week if they're really active, and have anywhere from 1 to 7 eggs, 7 worms in a cocoon. So they repopulate really fast. If you use these tips and follow what I've got in my course and in the videos on the channel, many people have been successful worm farming from the education passed on here via Marty's Garden. Yep, it's a proven success. We have many. I've lost count now how many are worm farming, but that's just absolutely brilliant. And happy to be here at tip number 5. Tip number 5. Now, I put my hand up like this because when people watch the rerun, they scroll through because they just don't have any patience. They're like, what's the next one? What's the next one? I need to know. And so we put that there and they stop on the scroll. Don't use tap water. Avoid tap water at all costs. It's okay if you've got nothing and you use it once and every now and again. But we want to use rainwater, or we want to use oxygenated water that provides it just doesn't have the chlorine and the nasty things in it. So find out what type of chlorine they're using, because there are different types, and there's the common one dissipates about 24 hours. So that's what I do. I let it sit for 24 hours and I put it through my worm farms. And you can bubble it, and if you bubble it with a bubbler, it takes about 2 hours. It's oxygen that removes it from there. GNS Watts, starting my son's 5th grade class in AZ. Looking for creative ways to keep them cool. Underground is all we've heard of. Do you have any tips? Yeah, we'll talk about underground worm farms more towards the end. And I've also got like a full build in the members area. So if you access, there's a join button below this video or a link in the description. And yeah, full build out of it in a big garden, and it works an absolute treat. It shows you all the super tips for getting an underground worm farm set up and ready to go. And it's a DIY one, so you don't have to buy one. All right, but we will talk about it more towards the end. So we have the Q&A closer to the end after the tips. All right. We've got to get the hand right here because I'm doing everything backwards and front. Number 6. Let's go with number 6. Harvesting castings. Harvesting castings, right. What a lot of people do when they get their worm farms, and they're like, I'm going to get all the worms out, do the harvesting. And then they've got this worm farm that's all dirty and stuff like that. So they get the hose in it, clean it all out, polish it like you would your kitchen sink, right? Don't do that. Leave, a good few, like some castings up around the side. Maybe leave a few handfuls in there. We want that old biology, those microbes, when you introduce new bedding, to breed and feed through that whole system. This is what we're creating, a biology farm. Basically, worms love all that microbes and that bacteria, so we need to keep some of it in there. Otherwise, we have to repopulate it and restart it again. And so that's my top tip there. And if you want to learn how to harvest worms, again, that's in the course, which I said is in that link in the description. Shows you the full pro method on how to do it really fast and effective. All right, so what we got now? Ooh, we're coming up to the super tips. We went through those pretty quick, didn't we? I've been running for about 12 minutes now. 14 people watching, 13 thumbs up. If you haven't given us a thumbs up already and you're digging the show, you're enjoying the tips, please do. I call them my bushranger thumbs up from Australia here. And I just like to do that for a bit of fun. So give us a big thumbs up and we'll keep enjoying the show, guys. All right, so let's go. Move along here. He's 10. All right, GNS Watts. Happy birthday. For whatever his birthday day was, the 5th grade class in AZ. I think it's keeping them cool is really important, but the main thing is just keeping a stable temperature, right? So we just want to keep them in a stable thing. And when you've got fluctuation of heat to cold, they're not as active. They get cold, they sort of shut down. They go into like a it's like a mode where they almost like go to sleep. Certain breeds do actually curl up and go to sleep, slow their heart rate down, etc. I just can't remember the exact term of it, but a lot of insects do that. So if you can keep the temperature nice and stable, such as in the ground, then you do get some pretty good success from that. So I reckon we move into some super tips now. Now, if you just come in a bit later, you can go back to the rewind and watch the first 7 tips. The first 6 tips, sorry, because we're up to number 7, and check them out. But do it later. You may as well grab the super tips if you're just coming in. Check them out later in the other live shows that we've just done recently, and a video that I released this morning about the problems that were going to occur with all this, like the inflation and stuff. And I give you some really cool worm farming tips there and talk about how worm farming and gardening together can save you a lot of money. So check out that video if you haven't yet already. It was released at 6 a.m. this morning, Australia time. And drop a comment and say g'day while you're here. Always love to hear from you, drag you in and say hello in the comments spot there. All right, so the super tips. How are we going to do this? Normally, I need some extra sounds to sort of like bring that in, like dun, 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 dun. No, that's a shark sound. That's not good. But you know what I mean, some extra music or something to bring the super tips in. All right, so super tip number 7. So let's get that up here for all you scrollers. So when you come through and scroll through the channel and skip all the parts. Have we got that right? Oh, there we go. 7. I'm doing everything back to front, so it gets a bit weird where the camera looks back at me in the software. This is a really good tip, guys, and this is something I would normally only share like in my course, Starting a Worm Farm, a Beginner's Guide in the members area, but I thought I'd share that here today for those who have turned up, come to watch the show, and want to do something really special. So when you're setting up another farm, you're getting another tray ready, this is really the key, right? And I have shared this once before in a video. If people, they scroll through and miss things, they won't see it. But this time, when starting another tray, wet down the liquid from your farm. Right, so let's imagine, let's go through to a farm here, where we got one. There we go. There's a worm farm there. All right, so just imagine we started another worm farm. We're going to add another tray on top, right? Now, this is the castings here. Down below, we want the worms to migrate up into the next farm, up into this area here, and this is all new bedding in the top, right? All new bedding. Get this liquid down the bottom here that's poured through your farm. It's got all the good bacteria. You know, use the fresh liquid that you've just poured through, and then your new bedding, and pour that back through that bedding and allow it to go back through again. It'll hit all that bacteria, especially if it really works really great if you're just starting off with a new cocoa fiber bedding as well, because it'll hit that. And if it's not sucking in the moisture, do it 2 or 3 times until it gets really wet, and then you've done your harvest of your worms like I've taught you in the course. Release the worms back into the top if you've already done like a full casting harvest, and yeah, that worms are going to love that moisture too from the bucket that goes through and hits it. So, and keep it really oxygenated and shake it around, stir it up, the more the better. So that's my super tip number 7, and I think that is an awesome tip, and something that people can take away that have been worm farming for quite a long time and been sort of more into that intermediate style of worm farming. All right, tip number 8. Remove and relocate your worms when your worm farm is full, right? So what happens is when your worm farms start getting full with lots of worms, it's super productive, chewing through the food, making lots of liquid tea, lots of good organic fertilizer from the castings. It's just exceptional, but it's not going anywhere. You're looking in and going, wow, it's just alive. Well, and the worms are starting to get really big. You notice a lot of trying to escape. Well, what happens is the bigger mature worms, they want to get away and allow the smaller ones to access to the food and find new breeding and feeding zones. That's what they want to do. So you need to start up another worm farm for them. If it's a beginner's tray and it's just your first tray, you can always put another tray on top. I don't recommend that you go 4 trays high like they sell them. I think that's too many trays. I think 3 trays is a good number. And yeah, start another worm farm, give some away or sell some worms, and allow those smaller ones to come out and have the space to go through. So that's tip number 8, and I didn't put my hand up for that one, did I? So if you missed that one, how do we get that? Oh, look, I just can't get that right now. There we go. I'll put it that way and do that. Tip number 8. That was tip. Far out. That just does my head in, looking back on the reverse. All right. This is where we sort of 8 mixes into number 9, and it really looks at this comment here from GNS Watts about underground worm farming. So this is easier. I can do that and then just take one away. Yeah, there we go. Tip number 9. There we go. Tip number 9. So underground worm farming. It's a great way to fertilize the garden. There's a bit involved in setting one up to getting it right. It's not just about sticking a worm farm in the ground, right? It's a bit more to it. And like I said, I teach that in the Worm Wranglers members area, level 3, couple of videos on it, and you'll never have to worry about making fertilizer for your garden hardly ever again. You might just want to top it up with a little bit of maybe rock minerals and stuff, just a little bit of fertilizer. But the worms will really do a lot of work in the garden. And when you've got compost worms and you're doing it right too, it attracts more earthworms. And so you end up with this amazing system that just works in synchronicity together. And if you see how I do my commercial systems, I have big underground worm farms. That's what they are. They're big ones, they're huge. Now, biggest worm farms ever model, the biggest worm farms ever, EVA, is the video that you check out on the channel to have a look at those for underground worm farming. GS Watts, have a look at that. Okay, let's bring up some comments here before we go to tip number 10, the super duper last tip. Before we start talking, asking you guys what tips you guys want to share here for me and the community here. Maybe you've got a top tip that you'd like to share. Love to hear it. That would just be awesome. Don't be shy. Any tip is worth it. Remember, we get beginners to intermediates to the pros come on here, and everyone enjoys the content that comes out. So please do. It was a great video, especially that overfed worm tower. Yeah, awesome, mate. Which one are we talking about? Which video? The last one? Oh, yeah, the yesterday's live show. Yeah. Thank you very much, Vermicost Learn by Doing. And I like to help all the other smaller channels and things like that too. So they've got a channel there, Vermicost Learn by Doing. If you want to support worm farmers on YouTube, go and check it out. All right, Tracy Ripley, how about a drum roll? That would have been the go. Maybe I can find the sound effects or find a way to add a sound effect to this software to make things more fun. I think that's a good idea, Tracy. Garden Kings, hello, mate. Cheers to you, my friend, and the missus. How was your day yesterday? Did you have a good... you had a mental health day like me. I went surfing. I had a lot of fun with a couple of mates. And went off and had some lunch. I ate... what do I have? I had fish, prawn cutlets, and squid at the local co-op. Oh, so good. Still taste it now. All right, number 10, tip number 10. Remember, guys, we want to hear your tips as well. You can share them in there, and then we'll move through and into the Q&A. Anything that you've got to ask, I'm happy to answer. And we've got 22 people watching, 18 thumbs up, which just means we're behind in the thumbs up challenge, right? We try and keep thumbs up higher than the amount of people watching. So it's funny, whenever I do this, ask people a thumbs up, people disappear. I was watching it, just went from 22 to 21 because I said, hey mate, can you give us a thumbs up? They go, no way, I'm out of here. And so we got down to 20 to 18 thumbs up. So please give us a thumbs up if you haven't already. It shows the YouTube channel, the YouTube algorithm, that it's a popular show and that people are enjoying the content. So it's just another one of their little things that they follow. And it helps me out big time. Right, tip number 10. Now, this is easy with a hand. I just got to get in front of the camera here. Tip number 10. Now, if you've come in late, it's bright, that light. If you come, I feel like a rock and roll star for the radiators. Ready, yeah, sure. They had this song with this guy used to do this sort of thing. If you're older like me, you'd know, an Aussie, you know what I mean. Bit of an Aussie thing, that. All right. Tip number 10. Feed your worms a Chow Blend. Yep, feed your worms a Chow Blend. Now, why would we do that? Well, if you're a bit of a worm nerd and you want to really get things going, you want to speed things along, a Chow Blend is something like any type of crushed up grains that you can mash up and mince and just make it slightly moist and feed it to your worms. It's high in protein. It's got extra carbohydrates and things in it, carbs and sugars and stuff, and they just really love that. And so you can do something like, like some oats, bit of eggshell for their grit, for their gizzard. Now that's another tip that we've pretty much forgot, is about the eggshells and the grits for their helping their gizzard so they process the food. So a little bit of eggshell. If you've got some rock minerals lying around from gardening, crush a bit of those up too, put it in. Now remember, when you're adding things like rock minerals and stuff, like people think, oh, they're not eating it. It's because they're only grabbing a little bit to put it into their gizzard so they can process the food a bit like a chicken. So yeah, use your mashed up grains and things like that. Or if you've just got some old oats lying around, or you've cooked some oats, like I use cooked oats when I've got a bit left over, because it usually has a bit of honey in it too, or a bit of sugar, and that sets off the bacteria much faster, and they get into that. Also, white rice is a ripper. They seem to like the sugars in that, and I think the sugars in it sets off the bacteria faster and just gets things happening. And the little babies, they grow quicker too. So there you go, one of your tips for you. Let's bring over some comments now, and remember, I'm waiting for your tips, guys. If you've got any that you'd like to share, anything small, maybe if it's a worm chow recipe, maybe it's one type of food that you get more success with, maybe it's a type of blanket, that worm farm blanket that you use, maybe you've got a way to collect the liquid. Love to hear what your tips are. Pinball Wizard, full supporter of this channel, always saying, leaving a comment and giving me a cool with a peace sign. Digging it. All right, Cutting Kings. Love it, Marty. You fancy man. Hopefully you had good dreams. I had a better dream last night. Thank you. Thank you very much. I did. Yes. Matt Ellsworth. Our first tip from one of our community, Matt. He's been on the show a few times here. And welcome, Matt, to the show. I bury any food that I put into my system. Seems to be working well. Keeps the bugs at bay and keeps the smell down. I have it in the basement. Just didn't want any problems. Yeah, burying it down is a good idea. You can get it right down quite deep. They're happy to just move in around that. And yeah, that's actually a really good tip. And you can do that sort of like with your underground worm farms as well. Sort of bury it down in there. So yeah, awesome tip. Thanks for sharing that, Matt. Chase Vanover. Welcome to the show. Chase, I have 2 kilos of worms on the way, along with urban worm bag. How much bedding should I use to get started, and how often should I be adding more bedding? Okay, 2 kilos of worms it's a good number. That'll really work out quite well for you. They'll have on the instructions, I'm sure, of how much bedding to put in there. But I would be inclined to sort of go about, get the thing about 2/3 full, and then slowly add to it over the time, because they get quite heavy, and as the worms are expanding out, you're covering more surface area, because they're like that, those urban bags, they grow out, you're getting more surface area, and so you can just add to it slowly sort of over time until you get to the preferred height of what they've got there. They do dry out a little bit faster. There's more airflow going through them. So just keep an eye on that. And I'd recommend, if you're using cocoa peat, try and get a bit of compost around as well to put in there to stop it from drying out. But cocoa peat holds water pretty good. So, just follow the instructions. If you're unsure, just go a little bit less and then add to it slowly. Hopefully that helps you. Chase, mate, the chicken feed works wonders. Yes. Super tip number 11. I've been waiting for someone to come up with that one. Yes, the chicken feed is really great, and you can get the mash as well, or pellets, and crunch it up. I'd go for more of an organic one. I'd stay away from the other ones than that. Just my personal opinion. Anderson Blask. A lot of coffee would be bad to worms. No, coffee grounds, they love it. I feed my my commercial systems all with coffee grounds, and they do really great. You just got to be careful. It does get quite hot in an enclosed farm like the farm that we're looking at, and then you would only use a tiny amount for something like that. So yeah, good tip. But coffee grounds are absolutely perfect, and tea bags. Just less is better inside an enclosed worm farm. Big worm farms, you can go for it more because the gases escape and the heat escapes. Look at that. There's some worms in there feeding away on some compost, and you can see that. Now, I would probably look at that and go, oh, maybe there's too much, but it's hard to tell exactly, because it's sort of like it's a small little shot, and the worms are there on top, feeding away on a wide variety of food. And yeah, a wide variety of food gives chance for different bacteria, more bacteria to form. If you've got some aged manure, you can always add a little bit of that, and that creates different microbes and things too. So here we have some worms feeding away. All right, how many people we got? We've got 21 people watching, 21 thumbs up. We still haven't gone over the number, guys. We've got to get over. So if you haven't given us a thumbs up yet, please do. GNS Watts. Excuse me a second. Time for a little drinky. Here we go. We have a water dispenser that holds the water so the chlorine disputes before we put it on the worms. Good idea. Way to go. We need to get rid of that chlorine first. I do pretty much the same thing by just letting it sit for 24 hours before it goes onto the worms. Vermicompost, learned by doing. My tip: use a couple of strawberry tops as your first feeding in the new farm. You can see how fast they eat it because they eat the fruit first and leave the leafy green parts later. That's a good fun one, especially for kids. Yeah, I really like that. That's an awesome one. Thanks for sharing. Vermicompost, learned by doing. I think that's a really good fun experiment. Yeah, you could even do that with the top of the banana. Chop the top of the banana off and leave the tip in the skin. They'd come up and eat the fruit, get all inside that top of that banana. That might be one that I'd like to try. All right, Garden Kings. We've got a question. Now, remember, you can fire away with the Q&A, guys. Happy to answer any Q&A questions. And if you've got any tips, share them as well. Garden Kings, is there any specific mould that you'd be wary of in the worm farm? I've noticed how much they love mycelium. But when it's not fully submerged in soil, the farm, it grows different colours. I would say it's probably getting, there might be a humidity issue in there as well. It wouldn't be too, it's a bit of a tricky one without seeing, but I'd be just inclined to sort of, it's just going around the plastic, it's just sort of wipe it out really, and just get rid of it. The only mould that I'm wary of is like that one that gets like that spidery sort of look to it, like it gets that, and I'd grab that and sort of remove that out. But I wouldn't be too overly concerned. I just most of the time just cover it with a bit of dirt or something, or a bit of extra compost or something like that, or just mix it through a bit. Is the bacteria the only bad bacteria that we have, right, is basically from when things go sour, so that it becomes anaerobic. So if everything's aerobic, don't worry about it. You're sort of overthinking it too much. If you're ever too bothered, just pull it out and throw it away, like I did in a video that you saw. Actually, I think it was on today's video, where I, at the end of the video, where I shown how a worm farm was overfed and what I did. And yeah, go and check that out if you haven't watched that already. It's in today's video on the show, more towards the end. Let's put this across. Strawberry top, first feeding keeps you from getting too curious and messing with it too much. That is a really good thing to say, because we lose our patience a bit. We start getting too curious, we start feeding it more and things. So that's a really good tip, especially at the beginning when we're learning, what's going to happen? Nothing's happening yet. Because worm farms, when they're first set up, they're a bit slow. Once they get going, they really start turning over, and just you observe them more and do less. It's just the feeding tip, like we're talking about in tip number 2, I think it was, for overfeeding. So if you've come in late on the show, go back to the beginning later on and watch all the tips right through, and even into the super tips. There's some good ones there. And we've got to thank Matt Ellsworth, Super Chat, $10. Thanks for all the tips, Marty. Thank you so much, Matt. What we do when we get the super tips and the super chats, super tips, super chat, we have an applause. Let's get this going here. Oh, look, I ruined that one. Let's go again. Yes! There's the artificial crowd thanking Matt Ellsworth for a super chat of $10. We go again. Here they are. Oh, wonderful stuff. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. It does help so much. Yeah, wonderful. Thanks again. That garden stuff. In my garden that has a lot of worms, I feed the worms anything that's been alive, even the forbidden foods, and they eat them just fine. My plants are doing great. No pests for at least 2 years. Yeah, look, a lot of the forbidden foods, yeah, you can do it if you're having success with it. It's just recommended more for beginners. I never throw in cheese or meat or anything like that, because I just don't like having any flies around. But like you can, as I think it was Matt said before, you can bury that stuff down deep as well. That's not a problem. I did that with some prawns the other day in one of my outdoor worm farms. Just dug a hole down, my underground one, went down deeper than usual, threw a whole lot of prawn shells in there, because that's going to break down and create a really good compost for me. So yeah, fish heads, all that type of stuff. But they're better in underground worm farms, right, than exposed ones. Because something goes wrong, it starts rotting, and you go, what's that? Oh, that's right, I put a fish head in my worm farm. You wonder why that night there was a dog around trying to break into your backyard. Thanks for sharing that, Dakine. And so, can be done. Vermicompost, learn by doing. I like that banana top idea too. Yeah, let me know if you do that. I'd like to know how that goes. I'm going to give that a try myself. So what we want to do is just sort of go over what we've discussed about, avoid overfeeding. Use the little, if you want to start off at the beginning, using a good quality bedding, maybe do the little strawberry top or a little banana top at the top if you're curious. Use 2,000 worms to get 2,000. Use a minimum of 500, but start off with around about 1,000 worms if you can. Use a quality bedding, such as a mushroom compost. And the super tip was, if you're doing that, you're starting a new tray, get that liquid that's been going through the farm, pour it through that new tray a few times, get all that bacteria going again, pour it over the worms as well, let it do it a few times, keep it really oxygenated. If you've got any really bad sour stuff that's smelly, throw it out and just keep oxygenating that farm. So if I was going to say anything for a tip number 11, which I wasn't going to give any more tips, oxygenation and flow is the key for the water going through your worm farms. And I teach that in the course where there's a link in the description, Starting a Worm Farm, a Beginner's Guide. And you can get the access to Starting Organic Seedlings, a Beginner's Guide. And there's also like an intermediate area of building out these worm farms using, egg cartons. These egg cartons and coffee ground layers. But it's more really for worm nerds, right? So there's some good stuff in there. Now, while we're moving through and we're just sort of getting some of these comments across, I want to show you something of a direction that we're going to be heading off a little while. Hopefully this is going to work. I'm having a few problems with my business and stuff like that, but that's a part of it all. We're always as solving problems and moving through, and then the next one occurs, so it's just pretty normal really. But I'd like to show you something in a second, so just hang on, and if you're interested in watching some more of the show, I'll show you what's going on. I gave the local gym gave me 5 kilo of out-of-date whey protein powder. Can I add this? Yeah, sure, go for it. No, just use a little bit at first. That's a really good thing. I think that would work really well, like a worm chow. It wouldn't hurt the worms, not one bit. Like, we can eat it, right? And yeah, it's gotten a bit aged. Wow, hey man, this could be a really good source for going to these gyms and going, man, you got any out-of-date whey proteins and things like that? I might even try that myself and just see that. Okay, yeah, man, just take it. We're going to throw it in a bin anyway. Great, awesome one. Awesome tip. That could be super tip number 12, I reckon. Dark kind garden stuff. I started 4 years ago with 250 worms in my hungry bin because I didn't know if I'd get a good worm mama. Look, you can start off smaller. It just takes longer, and you get less food in, things like that. So a hungry bin, really, I'd recommend if someone's going, what's the best way? I'd say 2,000 straight off the rack, minimum 1,000, because you've got more surface area. They can dive down deeper, things like that, and we really want them getting together and sort of like rubbing across each other like this here, so we can. Oh, I didn't show that one before. Do not overfeed. You can see an overfed hungry bin there. Don't do that. All right, so here they are, rub it across each other. When we've got bigger numbers closer together, it's more chance of interactive breeding, where they rub the catellums on each other, they release the sperm and they're hermaphrodites, so both of them can go off and lay cocoons. Absolutely brilliant. And yeah, top stuff, I reckon. Let me have another little drink here. So the more worms we have, the more chance of breeding and the more chance of them eating more food and laying more cocoons, and we get reproduction cycle moves in quicker. And generally we can, if optimum worm farm can be doubling in size every 3 months if we do really well. I totally agree with tip number 11. Oxygen is so important in a healthy worm bin. super important. If you've got a compact bedding and everything's compacted down, if you've got less microbial action going on, everything's not, it's going to break down way slower. The worm's got to work harder to get to everything, and your the moisture's got to lock up in the farm, become sour and stuff. So we want to have that blocky structure where water can get through. There's more pockets in the compost and things, and the water can flow through quickly so we can access it. So yeah, cool. Tip number 11, which wasn't supposed to be a tip, become a super tip, I would say. Is it bad to have a lot of worms in a small bin? Okay, so we're going back to one of the tips we were talking about. I can't remember what number it was now, but if you have too many, they just won't breed. You need to remove them on and move them into another farm, such as an underground farm, or put another tray on top, or have another farm or give some away. They need space to breed, right? And the big ones, they basically will want to move out and leave the smaller ones to feed. So yeah, if you've got a lot of worms, it's probably a good thing. It means you can expand out. And we teach the underground worm farming and expanding out of worm farming in this course. So starting a worm farm beginner's guide and turn it into seedlings using the other course, starting as organic seedlings beginner's guide. Perfect time of the year to get your organic seedlings going, nearly for free. Access in the link there. LG, how do you suggest keeping an outside worm farm not getting too cold when the temperature gets below zero? A lot of people, what they do, look, I live in subtropics, so I don't have that problem, but a lot of people bubble wrap blankets and then keep from any drop. You've got to have a cover over the top, so a roof cover, and so the air's not dropping down cold on it, and you want to have it raised off the ground so you're not getting cold damp coming off the ground as well. So raise it up, bubble wrap it, blanket, and the more bedding you have, the better. So I'd be more inclined to even have like good 3 tiers on a farm, not just a shallow 1 tier, good 3 tiers, with your bottom tier being your deepest bedding, right? And they'll move down into that, find a spot and just cool up and just wait till it gets warm, basically. As long as they don't dehydrate, they're generally fine. When they start getting below zero, they start having more problems. So yeah, great question. Awesome question. What I'm going to do is I want to find this. Let me go here. All right, so I want to share this slide. If you've been watching the show, you would have seen this slide already. But this is what we can actually have, right? When we're worm farming, we can actually grow our own herbs and things like that. We've got some basil there, some garlic chives, some parsley. It's just absolutely awesome. And you can grow this all organically using the liquid coming out of the farm and, using the compost out of your worm farm as well. And, because that's before you can actually use the compost out of your farm before it becomes all broken down castings, right? If it's halfway done, you can use it. So just don't forget that. No one teaches that. You can use the stuff that's half broken down as long as you get the worms out. Then you've got to sort of use the method that I teach in the course there. All right, so let's go on to this next one here. Now, you might be wondering, why are you showing me this, Marty? What's this got to do with worm farming? Well, if you've been hanging around watching the show today, we normally go for about an hour. Sometimes we go a little bit over. And I just wanted to show you something, because if you've been following me and my channel, you'd know that I'm down on site at a place called Three Brothers Landscaping. I quite like it down there, but they're still susceptible to floods. There's been a lot of mosquitoes down there, and I've got to pass everything through another owner, and it takes a long time to get feedback and things I can do and can't do. So we're looking at building, I want to build out a studio, right? So all the different worm farms set up, all the different types, show how they're all doing, anything from underground farms, different brands and things, to how you turn it into food and gardens. And we're looking at the possibility of, well, I 100% believe this is going to happen, of one of these like greenhouses here put up the side where I had the compost at the side of the house before, and building out a fence that runs straight off the end of the greenhouse, so probably something twice the size of this, a fence running down the side, so it looks all nice because I rent here. I've always been worried about that the rental, but I've been in here 5 years and it's a place that's pretty permanent. So I'm just going to go for it because I don't need to ask every time, oh, can I do this? Can I do that? Oh, can I have this? Can I have that? I've got to wait a week or more. And then I've got to hassle them, go, oh, do we cover it? Oh, Marty, we're too busy. And it's just not moving at the pace I want. And I want to have this up, like up and running so I can get the live shows and video out there and produce an interactive worm farming experience for you guys and just keep passing on the knowledge. So we're going to look at one of these, but not a cheap one. It'll be like have 8 mil polycarbonate and aluminium, some type of frame that's got a good 10-year warranty. It'll be an asset towards Marty's garden. We'll put worm farms inside, gardens inside, have a little studio area inside. If I have guests and things come in, we can actually be in there and have maybe a laptop or something and running the live show inside there. And just a part of the dream. So you can actually, if you want to support that and help me get to that space, we've got the Buy Me a Coffee link, which is in the description as well. You can head over and buy me a coffee, or you can become a member in there and it pays like a monthly thing over. And that's what I'm trying to do, is build up the monthly. So in the area where we've got the courses here inside YouTube, and also over in the Buy Me a Coffee space where people aren't interested in the courses so much, they just want to support the channel or give a donation. It really helps. Like, we've had some really good solid donations, and we're about halfway there. It doesn't show it on the coffee page, but we've pulled in about $2,000. So I think I need about $4,000 all up to get it going. So it's going to be could be like a little world first worm farming garden studio, showing all these organic methods to do that. So that's just something that I wanted to share with you. If you'd like to be a part of it, I really do appreciate the support. I'm on a very low income, and I have to humble myself to ask for this to make it happen, because it's almost impossible to do on my own. It's for you guys really watching my videos and giving super chats and providing buy me coffees and things like that. Someone bought me 5 coffees yesterday. Unreal. It all adds up over time. So I'm just going to go through some of these slides here, make sure we haven't missed anything, what we're talking about. And we just go back to these worms here. Now, my father just turned up and he says, yep, I'm listening in, Mart. My dad, he's a public speaker from Australia and fan of the Marty's Garden Show as well, obviously. Welcome, Dad, to the channel. Let's see if we can pull up any more comments here, because we do have some more. All right. See if I missed anything. How do you suggest keeping an outside worm farm not getting cold? Yeah, we've covered that. What about really hot temperatures? Well, if it gets really hot, you need to go out and hose your worm farm down more. Keep the lid open. Keep it, and then put on some cool blankets on top, like some wet t-shirts, some wet towels. Things like that. You can cover your whole farm, like instead of having a lid, get a wet towel and put that. You want to create this evaporation process which will cool it down, a bit like the old cooling systems that we'd have in our houses and stuff. My dad will remember this. We had one that was it was a fan, and you put water in the back and it was stinking hot. We'd put ice in the back of the tray. We stand there like this, like a bird, and probably go it's not working, Dad. Wait till the ice starts melting, and then it'll cool you down. So any type of that thermo process of keeping it cool. People even put ice blocks from their freezer, the ones that they freeze up, and wrap them in towels, put them in the worm farms, things like that. So yeah, that works really good. I know a lady across the road from me, when it's hot, she gets the big Coca-Cola bottles, those type of things, fills them full of water, got a big freezer, freezes them, keeps them in the top of a worm farm the whole time on top of the blankets, and it soaks through as it's melting, and then wets the food and then goes down through. It works great for her. I'd say that's a tip number 13 of a super tip, right? So hot weather, bottles of water on the top, few towels, food underneath as it's going through, and keeps the worms nice and cool. So there we go. Super tip number 13, I'd say, in that one. In the ground worm bins for northern lizard, I find is best. It's cold and wet here. It's a good idea. It's more of a stable temperature in the ground generally. And the evaporative cooler. Yep. So we just need to think a bit like that and enjoy, them cooling down. All right. If we've got any more tips that you would like to share, or you have something that you would like to ask, please fire away. I am here for a little bit longer yet, and we will keep rolling out on the show, on this live show today. We've got 20 people watching, 27 thumbs up, so we've gone above the number. We've reached a record, and thanks, guys, everyone that's done a thumbs up for the show already. Now, if you're coming in and watching the reruns, please leave a comment. Let me know what you've enjoyed the most, your favourite part of the show, or maybe one of your top tips that you would like to share coming in and watching the rerun, or even a question that you would like to ask. Happy to answer those people that couldn't make the live show today. So I'm about halfway through my water. What I generally do is I have a smaller glass than this, but I found that I was emptying it out all the time. So I think if we can, if I can get the interactive space going, it'll be much more productive here, and keep working on developing the content. And also, I'd love to stay down on the side at Free Brothers, but I've got to focus on one thing, and I want to keep them running together in conjunction, but I think I'm just going to scale down on the amount of compost that I produce and work on the production for like a wider audience, and really sort of work on reaching more people. Because the more people I reach internationally, the bigger a difference I can make in the world of composting and worm farming. And, the world is moving into this new revolution. People were calling it a green revolution years ago, but it's not really. I don't know if that's the terminology for it now. But the world's changing. We're moving towards putting that organic waste into landfills. We're thinking about, the councils are saying we don't want that done anymore. The next 5 to 10 years, depending on where you live, it's going to be obsolete. Businesses will not be able to put organic matter into green bins. They have to deal with it themselves on site. Also, households will have to as well. So compost worms and composting is going to become much bigger than we ever thought. And over the last 20 or 30 years, many advocates have been speaking about it, but it's had no growth because the chemical revolution has been taking hold of it, and they've got more money in marketing, and they've got more money of getting to the people and going, this is how you get this end result. But we want to change our end result and turn our waste into something wonderful. And by doing that, and we remove ourselves away from that chemical revolution, which has a really bad history. If you don't know about the history, it was a German scientist that invented chemical nitrogen around World War II. And then guess what he invented after that? Pesticides. And guess where the pesticides went? That was used in World War II on our... I don't want to get too much into that, but if you look at the history of it, and then where it went after that, they started turning those pesticides onto plants and turning it over. So you've got a problem. If you grow stuff with chemicals, you get really fast growth, which creates more pests and disease problem that needs to be solved with a chemical. And so you just sell them the one thing, then you sell them the other, and sell them zillions of it. And so what we've done is we've actually then created desertification on our land, which is like ruined our soils and removed all our topsoils, killed all our good bacteria in the soils. And the first dust storms in the States actually were caused by desertification, and I think they might have been around the 1940s, 1950s or something like that, and it blew everyone away. I remember seeing one here in Australia. It nearly reached us and it hit Sydney, and that's caused by farmers tilling the soil over and over and over again, destroying our soil. So what we need to do by becoming a composter and into worm farming, understanding soil biology, is to till the soil as less as possible, shallow till if we just want to put our seeds in. Don't disturb the soil. We want to store the carbon there, which is in our atmosphere, draw it down. It's called a drawdown, and so we draw down that carbon into the soil. Now we can do that on our lawns. Every one of our lawn is a carbon sump. Wherever our gardens are, we're touching that garden. And remember, every time you're going in and digging up, you're killing that topsoil. Now, I used to argue with people for years about this, and they just would argue back because all the marketing that was produced, all the money and the big bucks were going in saying this is how you do it. Even a lot of the old homesteaders still do this method and still argue to this day, black and blue. I'm sorry, guys, but if you're watching this and you think like this, start changing your mindset. Start using the drawdown, build the carbon, build the biology, feed the soil, not the plants, and you will always do well. Arthur Ware, hello there. Your son is truly a great, kind-hearted man. How did you create such a wonderful human? Well, that's a very nice thing to say. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm a little bit, got a little bit shy now, getting the red cheeks going on. And there's my father there. He was, he went down to Antarctica in, I think it was around about 40 to Macquarie Island. He's got all these amazing photos of down there of, like seals and whales, not whales, but, you know, like everything that sort of lives on the beach there. I think thousands, hundreds of thousands of penguins, which you'd think was like all pebbles on the beach, but there's just thousands and thousands of these things. I love nature. And so we want to connect all this nature together, you know, and by understanding our soils and understanding composting, understanding worm farming, people would think, how am I going to help a little bit? Well, you are helping by just recycling just that small amount. The more people that do this on site in their home, the bigger the results is a worldwide expansion of it. And there's one other person in our street that does it that I know of, but I can imagine if the whole street was doing it, how much waste. And you just start adding that up and do the math. It's quite a lot. We're talking millions of tons over the year, right? And that's going to happen because the councils and everything are changing all these laws and stuff. All right, so we got 21 people watching, 30 thumbs up. Cheers to you all for being here. It has been an awesome show, and hopefully if you've come in late, or hopefully you've been getting some value from the show. If you've come in late, go back to the beginning, watch the top 10 tips, plus all the super tips that have been added through this show as well. It'll really help you with your worm farming experience to turn your castings into what we call black gold and turn your liquid into an amazing free liquid fertilizer, and doing it virtually for free. Now remember, if you want to support the channel, there's some links in the channel. You can make a choice there of what's better for you and help me get to where I want to go, which is this guy here. We're going to build this out. Like I said, it's happening, but as soon as we sort of, we get some things rolling, some funds rolling in, it'll happen much quicker, and then I can get this message out to the world. And the better my productions and my videos, the more people it's going to reach, and I can actually then make an income as well and keep Marty's Garden channel alive. And like the way YouTube's going now, these older videos, they just don't get the reach and they don't get the watch time and all that type of stuff. It's moving into almost like this TV production, right? So you'd have to agree with me that YouTube in the last 5 to 8 years is a totally different animal. Like the productions now that are being produced, it's as good as a lot of the TV channels, right? And sometimes even better because they're more interactive with the community as at the same time as producing a piece of content. There's a guy named Youngbloods YBS, and he films he's over in Western Australia up in the northwest, and he films all these turtles and sharks, and he's spearfishing, and he's right into sustainability. They're out on boats, they're doing survival stuff, and it's just amazing. He's Australia's best YouTuber, I believe, and probably one of Australia's best exports at the moment as far as being that on the online world. And if you look at that quality of content, that's where people are going to need to be into the future, is like it's got to have this wow factor. It's got to be a lot of value there. And for me, I'm predominantly education than entertainment. So we've got to keep the education rolling. And that's why you might notice when I'll bring out a video every now and again, they don't do as good, but they have a different storyline to them, and we're trying to reach a bit of a different audience as well to expand out. So if I just put worm farming, everything, we just don't reach that other audiences. So it really fits into the sustainability methods. It also fits into now, like saving money and organic gardening, and even really like into the off-grid style of things, because when you're living off-grid, you've got to produce all this stuff yourself and be more self-sufficient. So yeah. How does the soil draw carbon if it's not hard to answer? That's a great question. So what's happening is it's actually, we're breathing in, we breathe in oxygen, we release carbon. Well, plants do the same thing. They actually take in carbon like we breathe in oxygen. So when they're doing that, they actually take the carbon down into the roots. And so roots are nearly pure carbon, right? And they're putting it down in the soil. And all the microbes in the biology need that carbon to survive. I think people are around about 7% carbon. And we need that. Without carbon, we basically don't live. But it's been developed by, if you're into sort of like creation like I am, the development of it is actually to take it in, draw it down and store it, and then feed the biology. Now, if you look at how a weed works, right? So people freak out about weeds, but we have a bare soil. And what happens is, so we go in and we spray all the weeds with soil, with a spray, right? A nasty spray. They all die. We open bare soil. What comes back again? Weeds. Now, the reason is because we need roots in the soil. If we don't have roots in the soil becomes dead. And what happens is the roots move down through the soil, open the soil up, produce the good bacteria and everything, which actually in the microbes and things, and then feeds the plants and creates this photosynthesis, draw down and draw back. So every time it's drawing down carbon and dropping it into this, what I call a soil bank. So it's dropping into the bank down there and storing up. And it's only unless we come and dig it and turn it over that it actually gets released. It gets stores down in there and gets used by the underground system. And yeah, it just holds it. And that's why you see a lot of government saying, yeah, we'll plant more trees and then we'll subsidise it off with a carbon thing and things like that, because they know how much carbon a tree will take down and store into the ground. But we can do that just like on our lawns, in our gardens and things. And people forget that most of these things, like you look in my suburb, it's all just lawns, gardens, that's working and it's drawing down carbon into the ground. And when we're sort of worm farming and composting, we're feeding these plants, making them healthier, making our soils healthier by doing that, and it's creating this much better cycle. So as a one-man band, we actually can do more than we actually think. But, because there's no money in it, no one tells you anything about that, except people like myself. I don't even know if there's anyone else talking about it, never heard it before. But that's how it works. So hopefully that gives you a good answer there, Scotty. All right, very interesting facts. I agree. The drawdown. So look it up. Look it up online. What is a drawdown of carbon? Plants draw it in and store the carbon in the soil. That's the basics to it. I just gave a bit of a rundown on how it works and why it works. How long does it take for worm cast to be ready? Around about 6 weeks to 3 months, depending on the time of year and how new your farm is. So the first farm generally can be 3 months. Then after that, you've got an active farm. Could be every 6 weeks, depending on the season. Rick Thielen, welcome Marty and everyone. Are you talking about Albie Mangle? No, this guy, he's... Albie Mangle's was way back, right? This guy's like the latest and greatest. He's the young gun of Albie Mangle maybe, but the production's way better because he's got better cameras and better gear and everything these days. And he's got a full team behind him, where Albie was a very small team, but still produces great stuff. So yeah, Young Bloods it's called. I very rarely yell out other channels that are not used to that, but you can just see the only reason I said that is because you want to see the quality of what we have to produce to be really up there and actually make a proper living. He's able to buy a house, he's able to buy boats, he's able to support a team, he's able to support wages, things like that. It'd be great to get to that stage where I never expect to be as big as him, but to be able to, have a team and, some admins and things like that running the show and stuff. And so really have to keep moving forward and produce this better content. That was the best answer I could ask for. Couldn't believe it. I hadn't heard of it before. No worries. You're very welcome. We're going to applause to that. The drawdown. Someone needs to write a song, The Drawdown, and then everyone would understand it more. And like I said, it's hardly any money in it. No one can make anything from it. So why talk about it? It's a problem with this world. And so But I will talk about it and bring it forward, and then you'll realize what you're doing. You're actually helping and making an impact here. When we look at this little garden here, like we get back to the setup that I'm going to have, probably twice the size of this greenhouse here. We just got to measure it all out. We'll run a fence down either side to make it look nice for the locals and to sort of hide some of the stuff. And then up the side of the house, we'll run more worm farms, so in between the greenhouse and stuff, and then under the eave. And then this will be like, have 8mm panel on it, so it'll hold back a bit of the noise. It'll allow light in for me to grow some plants and things like that, using all the stuff coming out of the worm farms in the winter. Then we'll put a shade cloth cover over the top into the summertime, and we'll have a couple more vents. There'll be 2 vents there and some shelving, and we'll be able to walk along and have all these different styles of farms and different things going on, try and create it more interactive and get you guys involved on what's the best way to do it, and try and, because it's all about the audience, giving the audience what they want as well, So I think we're going to finish up very shortly. Look, what I normally do at the end of these shows is people that are here and have been coming for a long time, that know each other, you can say goodbye to each other, say goodbye to me, and then what I do is I drag those comments across while we play our theme song. We've got 31 thumbs up, 19 people still watching. If you haven't heard the theme song before, it's a great song. Hang around, listen to the song. Please say goodbye in the comments box to your friends and to me, and I will drag that across. And just before we get to that, what I'll do is I will give you a quick rundown and put our worms there. Generally, we're about 30 seconds behind, depending on how many ads and stuff they're running and how things are going. So it takes a little bit of time for these comments to sort of roll through, especially when we're going longer than an hour. I think it extends out longer and longer. So I just want to thank everyone for coming, for their support so far. There's a few people in here that are already worm wranglers. They've already become a member at the Buy Me a Coffee and supported me by Superchats and by buying me a coffee as well. So there's links in the description to access all that stuff, guys. We can really make a change together. I know not everyone is going to get out there and create YouTube channels and things like that, but when you become a part of this, you really don't believe how much of an impact that you have just by being one person that turns up on a show. Could you imagine if no one turned up here? And you'd think, because one person adds up to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and then we have this unreal community. So let's get the songs across, and we will drag across our comments. I'll put the music on, and just hang around, listen to some music, and then we'll say goodbye right at the end.
There's a gentle breeze, all the birds are making homes inside the evergreens. The air is clear, with our loved ones close. You can pick out every star without a telescope. So beautiful to see how we have changed. In time, everything we've lost comes on again, and I will grab onto your arm a little stronger than we were before. I've missed your face, has it been that long? Looking forward to a fire and a sing-along. Let's stay the same as the children grow, and teach them all the simple things we thought we used to know. So beautiful to see how we have changed. In time, everything we've lost comes home again, and I will grab onto your arm a little stronger than we were So if you grab onto my arm, let's take a walk until the sun gets warm. In time, you know.
Okay, my friends, thank you so much. We'll just answer this one quick question for Jason here, mate. Sounds like it's wet enough. Yep, just you can grab the stuff, the material, get a couple of drops out of it. It's fine. If it's pouring out too much, it's too wet. If it's not getting a couple of drops out, it's too dry. So I'm pretty sure you're all right. You're better to be over wet than over dry. Garden Kings, hope you're keeping busy in the weather. And yeah, and glad I made it in time for the drawdown stuff and song. No worries, Mr. Himself alone. You have a great day, guys. Happy everything. And we'll see you at the next live show / video real soon. At the moment, we have Wednesdays and Saturdays video coming out. But it looks like if I get busy building this outdoor area here, we'll probably go to one video a week. Well, who knows? Maybe I'll show it in the vlogs getting it built. But we've got to do some research first on which is the best one to get up there. So remember, there's links in the description if you want to help out. Have a great day. Happy everything. Or did you say happy worm farming? I'm going to say happy everything today. We'll see you at the next video real soon. Bye for now.